I want to give y'all an update on the Carmelo Anthony situation, in case you ain't heard nothing. Did you know that he had to go in hiding because of threats and other people threatening his life and his family? I want y'all to think about that. He has been taken off the grid so people cannot find him or know his location.
You can feel the air get sucked out of the courtroom as a student witness pulls out what no one expected. Video footage from the day Austin Metcalf was killed. The grainy clip, recorded on a phone during the track meet at Canelo Stadium, plays on the screen for the jury. Gasps ripple across the gallery as the images confirm what many had only heard in testimony. Carmelo Anthony holding a knife, lunging forward, and Austin stumbling back before collapsing to the ground. For months, this case has hinged on conflicting stories on whether the stabbing was self-defense or a deliberate attack. But now, in front of everyone, the video lays bare a version of events that words could never fully capture. The jury leans forward, eyes locked, while Carmelo's defense team immediately objects, arguing the footage was never properly submitted into evidence. But the damage is already done. The courtroom has seen enough to form an impression, and the whispers spreading through the gallery are impossible to ignore. Reporters scramble to jot down every detail, framing this as the moment that could break the defense wide open. The Metcalf family, seated in silence, clutch one another as they watch their son's final moments replayed on the big screen, a sight no parent should ever have to endure. For the prosecution, the leaked footage is a gift. For the defense, it is a nightmare, one that threatens to unravel months of strategy built around raising doubt. The student witness who brought it forward sits stiffly under questioning, but his courage has shifted the course of the trial. What had been a battle of testimony is now something far more dangerous for the Anthonys, a case with visual proof. And as the jury absorbs every frame, the realization spreads. This trial may never be the same again. The courtroom erupts into chaos as the defense leaps to its feet, shouting objections before the video even finishes playing. Carmelo Anthony's attorney argues that the footage is inadmissible, that it was never properly disclosed during discovery, and that introducing it through a student witness amounts to ambush evidence. The judge bangs the gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but the atmosphere is impossible to calm. Everyone in the room has already seen the images, and the jury, despite instructions to remain impartial, now has a haunting memory that cannot be erased. Prosecutors counter swiftly, insisting the video represents direct evidence of the crime and that its omission was due to the student's fear of coming forward. Until now, they frame the witness as a brave teenager finally choosing truth over silence, someone willing to risk backlash in order to honor Austin Metcalf's memory. For the state, the timing matters less than the impact. They argue the jury has a right to see exactly what happened in those final moments, unfiltered by the distortions of second-hand testimony. The jury itself looks shaken. Some scribble notes furiously, others stare down at the table, but all of them have the same image burned into their minds: a knife flashing, Austin stepping back, and a sudden collapse on the track. That memory cuts through weeks of debate about whether this was self-defense. To the jury, it feels visceral, undeniable. The Metcalf family sobs openly in their seats, while the Anthony family sits in stunned silence, their son's future hanging by the threads of a defense that suddenly feels fragile. Even if the judge eventually rules to strike the footage from official consideration, the damage is irreparable. The jury has already seen it, and in a trial where reasonable doubt was the defense's only shield, that single video clip may have pierced it beyond repair. Long before the leaked video shook the courtroom, the foundation of this case had already been laid. On April 2, just hours after the chaos at Canelo Stadium, police arrested 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony in connection with the stabbing death of Austin Metcalf. Because Texas law treats 17-year-olds as adults in the criminal justice system, Carmelo was immediately processed through the adult system, a detail that raised the stakes from the very beginning. The charge was severe: first-degree murder, carrying a possible sentence of 5 to 99 years, or even life in prison if convicted. 12 days later, after heated debate, Carmelo was released from jail on a reduced bond. The court ordered him to remain on strict house arrest, a decision that divided the community. For the Metcalf family, seeing their son's accused killer return home felt like another blow. For Carmelo's family, It was a small reprieve, a chance to prepare for trial outside the walls of a cell. Still, the restrictions were tight: monitored movements, limited contact, and constant oversight. Every misstep could have landed him back behind bars before the trial even began. Meanwhile, prosecutors worked deliberately. Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis emphasized that his office would move with steadiness and principle, recognizing how deeply the case had shaken families and students across Frisco ISD. Investigators combed through witness statements, forensics, and timelines, ultimately bringing the evidence to a grand jury. When that grand jury returned an indictment for first-degree murder, it marked a critical turning point. The case was no longer just an arrest, it was a confirmed path to trial. That background sets the stage for what is unfolding now. The leaked footage and student testimony have added fire to a case that was already loaded with tension. But even before this new evidence, the trial was poised to determine the future of a teenager accused of murder and the legacy of a family fighting to defend him. For the Metcalf family, every hearing, every witness, and now every leaked video clip is another reminder of the son they will never see again. Austin Metcalf was just 17 years old, a student athlete whose life revolved around school, friends, and the promise of what was ahead. His parents describe him as a loyal friend, a competitor on the track, and a boy with a future that should have stretched far beyond a high school stadium. That future ended the moment he collapsed on the track at Kukendall Stadium, and the pain of that day has shadowed every step of this case. Jeff Metcalf, Austin's father, has spoken openly about the toll the case has taken. Following Karmelo's indictment, he said he believed justice would eventually be served, but that it will never bring my son back. For him and his family, the trial is not about punishment alone. It is about accountability, about making sure no other parent has to bury a child after what should have been a safe, school-sanctioned event. The community has echoed that grief with anger and fear of its own. Parents across Frisco ISD have demanded answers about how a track meet could spiral into violence. Vigils have been held for Austin, with classmates lighting candles and sharing memories, some breaking down as they describe the trauma of watching a friend's final moments. Teachers and administrators, too, have faced questions about security and prevention, how to ensure students are protected at gatherings meant to showcase their achievements, not end in tragedy. The leaked footage has only intensified those emotions. For the Metcalfs, watching their son's final moments replayed in a courtroom was a nightmare they never wanted. For the community, it turned an already devastating case into a visual reality they cannot unsee. In the eyes of many, this trial is no longer just about one teenager accused of murder. It has become a symbol of how fragile safety can be and how deeply a single act of violence can scar an entire community. This argument has shaped every move in the courtroom. When the student witness took the stand, Howard immediately worked to discredit his account, pressing him on the chaos of the scene and suggesting his memory could be flawed. Now, with leaked video footage circulating through the courtroom, the defense is fighting even harder to keep the jury focused on doubt. They argue the clip is incomplete, grainy, and inadmissible, a piece of evidence that doesn't capture the full scope of what happened on the track that day. Behind closed doors, the Anthony family has kept largely silent, rarely speaking to the media. In the courtroom, however, they remain a constant presence, sitting near their son, whispering with him during breaks, showing solidarity in the face of mounting accusations. For some, this loyalty reflects a family determined to protect one of their own. For others, it is a sign of denial, a refusal to accept the weight of what Austin's family has lost. The defense knows the stakes. If jurors accept the leaked footage and the student testimony as truth, Karmelo faces decades in prison, possibly life. That's why Howard's team has leaned on technicalities, cross-examination, and procedural challenges. Their task is not to prove Karmelo innocent beyond all doubt. It is to ensure that at least one juror sees enough confusion, enough uncertainty, to hesitate before delivering a guilty verdict. The strategy is clear: attack every witness, contest every piece of evidence, and hammer home the idea that in the chaos of a school fight, nothing can be seen with certainty. But with new leaks, new testimonies, and a grieving family pushing for justice, it is a strategy growing harder to defend with each passing day. While the courtroom has been dominated by emotional testimonies and shocking revelations, the prosecution's foundation has been built on a slower, more deliberate strategy. Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis has made it clear from the outset that his team would not be rushed by public pressure or community outrage. Instead, they spent weeks methodically piecing together witness statements, digital records, and forensic evidence before ever moving forward with formal charges. For Willis, the indictment was more than a legal formality. In a statement, he acknowledged the community's grief, saying the case had struck a deep nerve and that tragedies at school events shake people to the core. But he also emphasized principle, telling the public that justice is best versed when it moves steadily, not recklessly. His words reassured some and frustrated others, especially those who felt Karmelo should never have been released on bond. Still, the DA's cautious handling has given the prosecution credibility, framing them not as opportunists chasing headlines, but as a team determined to build a case that can withstand every objection and every appeal. The indictment also shifted momentum in the courtroom. No longer was this just an arrest based on police suspicion. It was now a formally charged murder case, backed by a panel of citizens and powered by the state's full resources. And as each day in court unfolds, from student witnesses to leaked footage, the DA's careful groundwork ensures that every new revelation has a legal framework strong enough to hold it in place. As this trial moves forward, one fact continues to hang heavily over every argument and every piece of evidence. In Texas, 17-year-olds are treated as adults in the criminal justice system. That single distinction transforms Carmelo Anthony's case from what could have been a juvenile proceeding into a full adult trial, where the consequences are far more severe. If convicted of first-degree murder, Carmelo faces a sentence of anywhere from 5 years to life in prison. For a teenager who was still walking school hallways just months ago, the weight of that reality is staggering. The defense has quietly hinted at the unfairness of this law, suggesting that a 17-year-old does not have the same judgment or maturity as an adult. But the state has made clear that age is not a shield. By Texas standards, Carmelo is fully accountable, and the jury must weigh his actions as though he were any other adult charged with murder. That fact has intensified the community debate, with some parents calling for reform while others insist that age should not excuse the gravity of taking another young life. Nationally, the case has begun to attract widespread attention. The combination of a school setting, 2 teenagers, and now leaked courtroom footage has turned the story into more than just a local tragedy. News outlets and commentators frame it as a reflection of larger questions. How safe are school events? How should the justice system handle violent crimes committed by teenagers? And what responsibility do families carry when their children's actions spiral into tragedy? For the Metcalfs, the legal and political debates are background noise compared to the reality of losing their son. For the Anthonys, the stakes have never been higher. One trial, one verdict will decide not only Carmelo's fate, but also the legacy of their family's name. And for the jury, the responsibility is enormous. They will have to decide whether this was an act of self-defense or a deliberate killing, and their decision will echo far beyond Collin County. It will ripple through Texas, and perhaps even across the nation, as one of the most high-profile trials to emerge from a tragedy inside a school.